Zelensky are due to speak any moment in Washington. Of course, the Ukrainian president came to Congress today to appeal for more aid to resist Russia's invasion. For more, I want to bring in now Tina Fordham. She is the founder and geopolitical strategist at Fordham Global Foresight. Tina, it is always good to speak with you. We know that Zelensky met privately with members of Congress, including the Senate Armed Services Committee's top-ranking Republican, Roger Wicker of Mississippi, who said that congressional approval for aid would likely slip to early January. He said the House is not on fire when it comes to Ukraine's need for ammunition and other weaponry. Is he right there?
I thought that was an astonishing remark under the circumstances. The houses are quite literally on fire in Ukraine. Russia is stepping up its attacks on Ukraine's civilian infrastructure. We saw this playbook last year as well. The effort will be to make Ukrainian civilians as miserable as possible during the impending cold winter. Whilst from a pure political perspective, this may be an excellent moment for House Republicans, congressional Republicans, to press for advantage on immigration reform. It's very much part of what I've written about as new doom loops between politics and conflict.
Yeah, new doom loops is a really good way of putting it. I like what you said earlier about how winter is approaching. History has shown, as you know, Tina, that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to prevail over Russian or Soviet forces in the wintertime. Give us a sense of where things stand on the battlefield as we head into the coldest part of the year, and how that sets us up, how that sets up Ukrainian forces in the spring.
Well, I think that Ukraine is disappointed that it hasn't been able to gain greater ground during the offensive of the last few months, but they have put up a valiant fight. But I'm glad you asked about the situation on the ground from a security perspective, because it is really discouraging to view this conflict in Ukraine as through the domestic political lens of potential for reforms. Russia and Ukraine both know how to fight in winter, right? This was something that was proven in World War II, but I just saw a tweet from Mike McFaul, the former U.S. ambassador to Russia, saying, imagine if in 1941 the U.S. had decided to delay aid to the U.K. for a year because of domestic issues. Of course, there is an interplay between domestic politics always and conflict.
Yeah.
But the urgency is real, I think, and war fatigue is another factor at play.
I understand some of the fatigue here, but there are some broader issues here that I think everyone knows, or at least recognizes, not necessarily wants to address, and that's the idea that if you don't provide the aid and Putin is successful in continuing to grab land out of Ukraine, then what stops him from just going deeper into Europe, going into the Baltic states, going into Europe? What's to stop China from doing what most people think is its long-held ambitions to retake Taiwan? What's to stop some of the big moves that are now starting to bubble up in Latin America here? There's a broader issue here. Does that not matter?
Well, it should matter, because when we, first of all, 85% of all conflicts are over territory. So people who sort of try to dismiss these small land grabs, initial small land grabs, and I warned about this when Russians invaded Georgia and took Crimea as well. I mean, of course, you start small and then you go bigger, but if we don't respect territorial integrity, things get more complex. You mentioned Venezuela and this kind of referendum that has been put forward. Just about every country on the planet has a bit of another country it would like to take back or has some historic claim to. So really there is the most basic principle of rule of law and order.
Absolutely here, but there are some people, as you know, and these aren't just the quacks. There are people, legitimate people here in the U.S., politicians and other sort of thought leaders, who say that the U.S. for so many years has been kind of the global police on the beat, if you will, stepping in to sort of resolve these conflicts, and has done so in many ways to some damage to itself, whether it's financially or whether it's maybe just the optics of our role here. And maybe it was time for us to step back and say, these are fights that maybe someone else needs to fight.
The Europeans have played a huge role in Ukraine, the Europeans and the UK, where I'm based. I think the US-led global order has brought the US exponentially more benefits than what it may have provided in terms of aid. The end of the Pax Americana, as it is known, is something that should worry investors, business leaders, companies, as well as global citizens. Wars take a long time to fight. Which wars is another question. I mean, Iraq and Afghanistan were very, very damaging, I think, to the U.S. sense of its global role. We saw President Obama very much chastened by those experiences. I do think that Ukraine is in another category, and frankly, what the U.S. is providing in terms of aid is an inexpensive way of dealing with one of our longest-standing global adversaries. This is a security-first world right now. If we don't protect the global order, what happens underneath it is going to be small potatoes by comparison. But yes, I mean, being hostage to domestic considerations is not unusual. 65% of Republicans think the U.S. is giving too much aid to Ukraine. This is where leadership comes in, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Tina, always great to talk to you. Very level-headed. Tina Fordham, founder and geopolitical strategist over at Fordham Global Foresight, as we do await that press conference between Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine and President